So, as I do a lot of history and many other different subjects, but I also do geology, and I'm very interested in the history of Scotland. But I would like to do a story on the subject of Loch Ness, because quite clearly people have a lot of interest in the subject matter of Loch Ness and the claimed monster of Loch Ness. But unfortunately there's a serious problem when it comes to if this monster is a plesiosaur, because plesiosaurs are supposed to have died out 60 million years ago. So the question is this: how old is the loch? The only way we can answer how old is the loch is to look to the geology on both sides of that loch, and obviously in the bottom as well. We already know that the last ice age was 10,000 years ago, so quite clearly well away from the 65 million years that this plesiosaur was supposed to have existed. So we already know that the continents split up about 13 million years ago. We know this because of the important features. The split up is taking place on average about 4 inches a year, so therefore we can calculate back the distance of 3,500 miles to the coast of New York. We can see the fact that the coast of New York seems to fit in to that of what we now call Scotland and England and Britain, and we also know that the continent of Britain seems to fit into the continent of Norway and the rest of Europe. So quite clearly there is a connection between the land surfaces. So for this reason we have to then look at how long, or how old is this loch? Can it date back 65 billion years? And the only way that can be answered is to look to the geology. We're spending far too much time looking at the water, and also we already know that the sediments left by the last ice age would have to have been actually left in the bottom of the lake. So quite the Loch Lana. So quite clearly that would not be the answer. So we're told, we can see actually from the way the loch is, we know that the ice age has clearly carved that rock. But the question then has to ask is when. It doesn't have to figure just because the last ice age that ended 10,000 years ago that the loch was actually carved then. It could have been a lot more, because there's been 22 ice ages since the birth of the Earth 1.5 billion years ago. So that is not the answer. So many times that people have looked into this loch and into it looking for answers of plesiosaurs and large fish and all the rest of it. But quite clearly we can already determine from history, from geology, that the plesiosaurs are air breathers. So quite clearly you expect to see more of these creatures if they're there. But the problem is this: quite clearly they lived in the shallow seas rather than what we now call obviously Britain. It's obviously been formed because of 13 million years ago, so quite clearly it couldn't have been connected 13 million years ago. So the question then is, if it lived in the sea, then exactly when and how? Because if the argument was that the continents split up 13 million years ago, then obviously how did the creatures get into the loch? Because quite clearly it couldn't have been there, so the loch could not have been formed. So if it lived in the shallow seas, clearly these creatures could not have been in an inland lake. So an inland lake, unless there's a connection. But what is the connection? There's a large tunnel or a cave in the middle of the loch, and that's as well known. I mean, the submarines have been down to have a look, but they should be looking at the inflow to see if there's anything happening, i.e. if there's water pouring down through that hole, in which case they may be able to stick something down there. Otherwise just let it drop in and let's see whether or not it comes out into the sea at the other side. Quite clearly that should be done. But the question then is, obviously, granted it may in fact get trapped down there, so it might not necessarily actually come back out. But is worth the try. So, if we must look at the facts, is it possible for there to be a plesiosaur to live in Loch Ness? I have great difficulty understanding how that is possible, because quite clearly the loch doesn't date back 65 million years. The answer to that then is very simple. When was the loch found? When was the loch formed? We can only answer that by the geology on both sides of the loch. We have to look down the sides and obviously go down towards the bottom on each side. If we can get rock samples on both sides of the loch, basically the whole miniature loch, we can then look at the evidence as to whether or not it's possible for that loch to date back the 65 million years needed, or is it the case that loch has got something other than a plesiosaur? And as people have actually said, it could be obviously sturgeons or anything else, a new creature or animal that's actually hasn't yet been discovered. So there's very important factors to look at in this story of Loch Ness. We are making so we really need to do something to do this if we're going to understand this. There's not going to be any way of doing this otherwise.